Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you joining us today. If you've, ever dreamt of building one of those stunning, jaw-dropping saltwater reef tanks right in your living room, well, you are in the exact right place. There's just something literally magical about watching a miniature ocean ecosystem thrive, with all those vibrant colors and mesmerizing movements. But let's be real, as anyone who's looked into this hobby knows, it can also seem incredibly daunting. Today, we're breaking down a comprehensive guide on soft corals. Specifically, we're looking at the absolute best picks for new reef keepers. By the end of this explainer, you're going to have a clear, actionable roadmap for getting your very own thriving reef started.
So have you ever looked at a breathtaking saltwater aquarium and thought, man, I want that, but I absolutely do not want the stress of keeping super delicate things alive? Honestly, it's the ultimate barrier to entry. So many beginners look at those rigid, highly demanding stony corals and just immediately feel intimidated by the sheer amount of precise chemistry and lighting they require. And frankly, the thought of tearing your hair out over microscopic adjustments, yeah, that's enough to scare anyone away. But here's the really good news. You don't have to start there. We're going to look at a highly forgiving, stunningly colorful alternative, soft corals. These are the corals that let you actually enjoy the beauty of the hobby without all that endless frustration.
Okay, let's dive into this soft coral solution. Soft corals are pretty much the perfect entry point for one massive reason. They just do not demand the extreme placement precision that stony corals do. In most tanks, if you pair them with reasonably stable water parameters, appropriate lighting, and just your basic feeding and flow, they're going to establish themselves fairly quickly. You really don't need a degree in marine biology to figure out exactly which millimeter of rock to place them on. They give you a much wider margin for error, all while still providing that lush, thriving reef look we're all constantly chasing.
All right, moving into Section 1, the foundation. These are your hardy beginner favorites.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we contrast two of the most popular, quote-unquote, unkillable first corals, zoanthids, which most people just call zoas, and mushroom corals, specifically looking at the Discosoma and Rhodactis varieties. Both of these are just incredibly resilient, but they bring very different things to the table. Zoas are your absolute go-to for eye-popping, vibrant color palettes. Mushroom corals, on the other hand, are famously tough and actually have this incredible capability to reproduce on their own in captivity. Let's look a little closer at what each of these needs to truly thrive in your setup.
Starting off with zoanthid care. Generally speaking, they do wonderfully under just moderate lighting, which makes them super accessible for beginner setups. When you're picking them out at the store or just checking on them in your tank, what you want to look for is full polyp extension and bright coloration. That's your visual indicator of a happy, healthy zoa. But, and there is a catch here, while they're incredibly resilient chemically, you absolutely must keep them safe from direct mechanical stress. That means keeping them safely away from any sand-sifting equipment or tank critters that might physically smother them. They're tough, for sure, but they aren't exactly looking for a deep tissue massage, so keep your hands and your sand-sifting gobies off them as much as possible.
Moving right over to mushroom corals. These are perhaps even more forgiving than zoas. They can tolerate a surprisingly wide range of conditions compared to most other reef organisms. And here's the really fun part. They actually reproduce by splitting or budding right there in your tank. It's like getting free corals. When you're picking one out, you want to look for the green flags, firm tissue, and perfectly intact edges. Definitely steer clear of any red flags. Avoid specimens that look pale, collapsed, or have been overly deflated for long periods of time. You want to start your foundation with healthy, robust livestock from day one.
Section 2, the statement pieces. This is where we focus on adding space and motion to the tank.
First up in this category are leather corals, like the famous Kenya tree. These are absolutely fantastic for beginners who want to add that swaying movement and fascinating texture to their underwater landscape. They generally handle tank life incredibly well. However, because they are a bit more dynamic, they do require some thoughtful placement. Leathers really need room to expand, and they actually shed tissue as they grow. Because of this shedding process, you absolutely must provide adequate room between them and their neighbors. They also need consistent flow to help wash away that shed tissue. Just make sure that flow isn't, blasting them continuously in one single spot. That'll just make them miserable.
And this brilliantly illustrates a really fascinating, somewhat hidden aspect of keeping soft corals. Welcome to the world of invisible coral chemical warfare. Scientifically, this is known as allelopathy. Soft corals essentially release defensive chemical compounds right into the water to secure their territory. It's kind of like a neighborhood turf war, but without anyone actually throwing a punch. When you have a densely stocked tank, these invisible compounds build up, and your corals are essentially fighting each other for space without ever physically touching. It's a completely amazing survival mechanism in the wild, but in the closed system of a home aquarium, it can cause a lot of stress for your livestock.
Fortunately, there's a very practical, totally actionable solution to this chemical warfare. To combat this stress and keep the tank's neighborhood perfectly peaceful, you want to utilize activated carbon in your filtration. This absorbs those defensive compounds. Pair that with sticking to a strict schedule of regular water changes to keep the water column clean. These two simple habits will ensure that your diverse soft corals can live together in perfect harmony without silently stressing each other out.
Let's look at two more incredible statement pieces side by side. Cult corals versus Xenia. Cult corals look super impressive, but they require gentle, indirect circulation. Too little flow, and they just won't expand. Too much, and their delicate tissue actually gets damaged. You want just enough flow to keep the polyps extended without battering the poor coral. Contrast that with Xenia. Xenia actually pulse like a beating heart. It is literally mesmerizing to watch. But here's the catch. That famous pulsing movement relies heavily on long-term tank stability. If your water quality or your flow is constantly swinging around, they just won't thrive. It's all about realistic expectations here. They grow really fast in the right environment, but that environment absolutely must be consistently stable.
Let's move to our third section and see how this builds. The blueprint for placement, care, and thriving. Believe it or not, poor placement and rushed introductions are often the real culprits when a coral struggles. So our blueprint is simple and practical. Step 1. Quarantine when possible to stop hidden hitchhikers or nuisance organisms from invading your main display. Step 2. Acclimate gently by matching the temperature and water chemistry so you don't shock the animal. Step 3. Start the coral low in the tank to safely let it adjust to your lighting, and then gradually move it up once it shows good color. Step 4. Always watch the neighbors and leave adequate space to account for that allopathy we talked about. And finally, Step 5. Supplement their light energy with targeted planktonic feedings. Following this 5-point approach, it completely changes the game.
So the crucial point is this. When a coral fails and a hobbyist throws up their hands calling it a mystery failure, well, the real issue is almost always a lack of foundational stability. Soft corals are resilient, yes, but they absolutely despise wild swings in their environment. Your primary job as a reef keeper boils down to providing 3 main things: stable salinity, stable temperature, and consistent nutrient management. If you can just maintain those 3 pillars, you create an environment where even fast-growing soft corals can comfortably settle in and really flourish. I want to highlight a golden rule directly from our source material today, and honestly, it is the single best piece of advice for any focused learner entering this hobby. Pick 1 to 3 soft coral types, focus on correct placement and consistent husbandry, and let your tank stabilize. Actually, scratch the idea of rushing out and buying 10 different corals on day 1. Don't do it. Start small with just a few frags. Focus entirely on placing them correctly and keeping your water parameters rock steady. Let the whole ecosystem settle. Once those first few corals are established, you'll have such a clear read on how your system performs, and you can confidently and safely expand your reef from there.
And just like that, we've reached the end of our explainer. We've covered the bulletproof foundation pieces like zoas and mushrooms, the dynamic statement pieces like leathers and zinnia, and of course the vital blueprint for keeping them all happy and healthy through stability and careful placement. Armed with this guide, that intimidating saltwater hobby isn't looking so scary anymore, is it? It's really just a matter of making smart, informed choices. So I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder as you plan out your dream tank. Which soft coral is going to start your reef journey?